I've got to say, it's strange putting faces to you all.
I have a strange face. Hey, Treatment-Free Beekeepers. Welcome back to another episode. This time around, I have all, or at least most of the moderators from the Treatment-Free Beekeeping Facebook group. We have, in no particular order whatsoever, Rupert, Angie, Mitch, Mike, and Bruce, who are our moderators for the Treatment-Free Beekeeping Facebook group. And we're just kind of sitting around having some conversations about bees today here during the pandemic when we have some extra time. We get into some really good topics, talking about insulating hives, new diseases, whether or not bees can survive in different places, catching swarms, feral bees, and a bunch of other good stuff too. And it's kind of a bonus size episode, a little bit longer than an hour. So have fun, sit back and relax, or do like I do and put some headphones on and go outside and do something productive while you're listening. Welcome everybody. Let's get everybody introduced real quick. First on the line, we have Bruce Rodriguez, the Pennsylvania Swarm King. Say hi, Bruce.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Next, we have Michael Cox, my second in command of the Facebook group.
Hi, everybody.
After that, we have Rupert, all the way in from Scotland.
Hi there.
And we have Angela Tollerson from the Great White North of Montana.
Hello, everyone.
Well, what are we going to talk about?
I'm just pleased we've got a chat with all of us going. It's the first time we've had a call as a group, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So I've obviously spoken to you, Solomon, before. We did our one-to-one podcast, but not a group chat. So
yep,
let's see where it goes.
I think everybody's been on the podcast. Did you do one?
I did one on Bruce's one.
Okay, that's right. So
Okay.
Rupert and Angela have not yet been on the TFB podcast. We've all, or at least some of us have been on Bruce's podcast, and that's where I actually got the idea, because we've never had really like a big group chat on the TFB podcast before, and I have been wanting to do group chats just for I don't know, continuity's sake for the Treatment-Free Beekeeping group. And so now we have most of the moderators, and we're going to be talking about a couple pet peeves and issues and things, what we're doing this time of year, and having a chat about bees. And if you don't have friends that you can talk to about bees like this, you should definitely get some. Definitely don't hang out with those people that are telling you to treat all the time.
Yeah, I mean, my friends here, oh my God, my friends are totally loaded with bees just because I can't get them all. And they're just, get connected with them, know where they're at, send them calls, they'll send them back. We're loaded with bees here in Pennsylvania. I wish nobody would have bought bees, or I'd have more to give.
We've got swarm season well underway here in the UK. I've had 2 in my own garden in the last couple of weeks, and had a couple of calls for ones fairly locally. I haven't caught many yet because of all the lockdown stuff going on, so I haven't been particularly advertising my services and heading out to do stuff, but well underway. My own bee numbers are down a bit at the moment. I had a bad year for weather when I was making splits and nukes up when queen rearing last year. And I think I made 8 splits last year, and I think only 2 successfully ended up with mated queens. So my numbers are a bit down, and I'm building back up again this spring.
How about you, Angie?
I think I'm going to luck out this year with my queen mating, because normally we have up to 3 weeks per month in May and June of rain. And it's kind of hard for the queens to find a window, but my queens are due to emerge today. And the week looking forward is going to be in the 70s. One day we're going to have 80 and some sun. So looking good for mating.
Awesome. My project this year is playing around with a new concept. I sort of got from Sam Comfort a year ago when I was hanging out with him, and I guess I'm calling it micro splits because that's what he called it. And basically the idea is you make walkaway splits with queen castles, where in my particular case I have 3x3 queen castles, so 3 nukes with 3 frames each in one big box. And so what I do is I take a frame of open brood, make sure that it has either eggs, or if I can see eggs, I know it's good, or if it has very young brood, just emerged, or just, what's the term for just hatched out of the egg? Because emerged is like when they come out as adults. Anyway,
I think it's hatched.
Hatched? All right, I'll go with that.
Yeah, when hatched. Yeah.
So very young brood, and then I put a frame of mostly honey, or maybe some pollen if they've got that, and then an empty frame, just an empty comb. And I put those in each one of those nukes and allow them to raise their own queen. Oh, I also will shake in a frame or 2 of bees in that 3, just kind of across the top of that 3x3 setup. And then I take that to my other yard, which is about 17 miles away. I wish I had one a little closer, but we'll get there. And let them mate. Or I could just bring them back immediately. The whole point of taking them somewhere else is so they don't drift back to the old hive. And then I brought them back, and they began, the queens have begun laying eggs. I have had one swarm that was actually a multi-queen swarm, but that's because one of those queen castles all swarmed at once, and I ended up with several queens in the same swarm. So that's something I'm trying to figure out, if that's just a feature of that type of splitting technique, or it just was a fluke, because sometimes hives that are queenless like that, with lots of virgins hatching out at the same time, will throw a bunch of secondary swarms like that. Do you guys have any experience with that sort of thing?
Multiple queen swarms?
Well, like a queenless hive that's just raised a bunch of new queens and throws off a bunch of virgins with a swarm or multiple swarms.
Yeah, almost every swarm I'm getting this spring in my yard, and even the ones I go out on calls for, have more than one. One had 6, so I had to split them all up. If you try to hive them with all those queens in there, they end up just half of them take off, and you're left with a big box with 2 frames of bees. But yeah, I've had a lot of that.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever a swarm with more than one queen in it here in the UK. It may just be a feature of the swarms I'm seeing, because I seem to get called for like a classic swarm in someone's garden rather than a beekeeper's produced from beekeepers' hives. I don't know, but I've never seen a multiple queen swarm that I'm aware of.
And just joining us is Mitch Baker, who's also one of our moderators and lives in Bruce's neck of the woods.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey Mitch.
What's up?
Mitch.
How are
nice
you doing?
to talk to you guys.
Yeah, how you doing with swarms there, Mitch?
Not nearly as busy as Bruce, but it has been pretty busy. Some of my hives I've been really lucky with. I've been pretty busy this spring, so I've had multiple of my hives swarm out and either swarm directly into a box 20, 30 feet away, or one of the farms that I keep hives at, they swarmed, did a lap around the farm, scared all the cattle and the horses, and then went directly into a box that was like 15 feet away.
Man, that's convenient.
It was easier than if I had split them.
That's true.
I went to catch a swarm in a friend's garden the other day, and they were about 4 or 5 meters up in a tree, and I spent a bit of time working out, well, what can I do with them? They were up that high. And I spread my sheet out under the ground and worked out if I just shook the branch, that most of them would land on the sheet. And I did the classic thing, shake the branch, they all fall down, a load of them land on the sheet, but the bulk of the swarm went airborne and went straight over the road and into a chimney up 20 meters away. So I was like, I'll just keep quiet about that one. I might not tell people that swarm just came from what I was trying to catch.
Until right now, on a international platform.
None of you know these people. It's fine.
They don't listen to podcasts. It's good.
I think I called one of Mitch's the other day. I forgot to tell Mitch. I didn't realize where I was at until I pulled out and got onto the main road, and I was like, wait a second. Mitch lives like right there.
Oh, so, down in Robizonia?
Yep, right on 422, right off.
I actually don't have bees on this property anymore because I got neighbors that were not fans, so I decided to do the responsible thing and move them because it's technically against the local ordinances.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe it's not yours. There was a lot of big trees there. I just couldn't find the parent colony, so maybe some more wild ones. I'm getting a swarm call right now, actually, as we're talking.
Nice.
Well, it's a text. I'm not.
I actually had to. The one that you gave me, that were on the corner of the porch, they actually moved into the floor of the porch. And that was one of the first times that I've used the bee vac that I made. And then that went wonderfully once I brought the bee vac out. I just pulled the side trim off the porch and vacuumed them all up straight into a hive.
Cool.
Sweet.
Must be difficult for you, Mitch, trying to decide between a chat with mates and rushing off to catch a swarm.
That's me.
Yeah, that was Bruce.
Yeah, it's cool. The swarm is very tempting, but I'm gonna hang out with my dudes and Angela.
How many are you up to so far this year?
I stopped counting about 40, 45, but I'm probably at like 70 right now. I have some to pick up tonight. I got one today. Yeah, it's too many. I got to get rid of some of them.
What do you do with them?
I give people that live close to me, a lot of times I'll hook them up with them, on the condition if they survive, I can have a split. If they don't survive, I'll give you another one. But, if they're within mating distance of my bees, I try to just saturate my area with non-packaged bees, and that's what I do. Some of them I'll sell if they're not from around here, or if I don't, my good buddies and everything, forget about it. They don't have, they get bees. But, if it's just somebody who wants to buy bees, I'll sell a bunch of them.
It looks like a great place that you've got there. You've got plenty of space.
Yeah, it's filling up, though, really bad. Like tripping over boxes over here.
I just got some extra equipment that seems empty so far. So, hey.
Well, come on over.
Is it a climate thing that you think is getting that many swarms? I mean, I'm competing with a lot of beekeepers in this area because we have a dense urban population, lots of people keep bees, lots of active beekeeping associations. So the swarm calls get scooped up by people pretty quickly. Is there just not much competition for them where you are?
No,
or is it?
No, there's a lot of competition here. There's a lot of beekeepers here. And we have good climate, but it's not that. I think it's just because of the webpage that I set up. I've had it for a little while. I always contribute to it and keep it updated, and I talk about bees on there, so I come up first in the Google search. And every message I get is, I just saw a swarm of bees, I Googled and you came up. So that's the only reason I think I get most of the calls. That's it.
That's cool. When I was getting back into bees, after my gap, for people who don't know, I had a period where I stopped having bees because of a severe allergy, and I had treatment for it. So the good news is you can get back into bees after treatment. But I did exactly that. I set up a website. It's just a really simple one, 3 or 4 pages of it's a free WordPress site, and I put Google ads on, and I think I paid about £30, £40 over a couple of months during the swarm season for adverts in the local area. And I think I took 40 or 50 calls for swarms. So people do search on Google, and if you pay for ads in a local region, you can get a lot of calls very quickly for bees.
I did the very first year that I was keeping bees, Michael. I did the same thing, and it's the only time that I've ever bought bees because I wanted to. I was new to bees, so I bought a package thinking I can plan this out. I can mentally prepare myself. I won't jump in over my head. So I had installed those bees like on a Tuesday. And then throughout the week, like that Wednesday or Thursday, I made a web page, same thing that you're talking. And like, it came with like, so much free credits for Google ads. And I was like, well, by the time someone in my area finds little old me on the internet and actually gives me a call, I'll be prepared for this. So I made a little website that said, hey, if you got a swarm of bees, this is what it looks like, blah, 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 give me a call. I didn't have a spare box. I didn't have spare frames. I had spare nothing. And then that Saturday, I'm sitting there eating a bagel, and I get a phone call. And then I ended up calling Bruce. I had met him at a beekeeping meeting like the previous weekend. And I gave him a call and said, look, you can have the bees. Just show me what to do.
And that's super important. I do that locally as well. I'm not particularly interested in collecting lots of bees. I'm pretty saturated in terms of like work itself, family and things. I have about the right number of bees, but I do get involved in swarm calls because they're fun. But I often take out people locally from the local beekeeping association who are doing their first swarm catch, and talk them through it and help with that stuff. It's just a really nice, fun thing to do, meet new beekeepers and do that process. It's great.
I got my wife to collect a swarm in the backyard the other day when they swarmed before I moved them off site. And she had called me at work and said, "Hey, there's a swarm in a bush. What do I do?" And she's also pregnant with twins, so she couldn't get she was nervous, so she wanted to wear the jacket, but she couldn't get it over her stomach. So she's out there with a jacket just pulled down barely over her midsection, stomach completely hanging out, just a t-shirt over it and stuff like that, shaking a swarm of bees into a box for her first time.
That's great. I'm cackling here, but I'm muted, so you can't hear me. I took my family out to the swarm the other day, and I've got 2 boys. I've got a 7-year-old and 8-year-old now. He had a birthday the other day, and a 3-year-old. And we were just watching these bees. And my boys, they're right up close to it. They're watching it and everything. And I'm trying to persuade the family at the garden we were at to come closer and see it all. But we've had swarms right in the garden, and we've all been out in the garden, in our own garden here, without any PPE on. I've got one video I took when my youngest he would have been 1.5, and he's actually naked. He's not in the video shot, but I'm holding him, and we're watching a swarm of bees that are less than 2 feet away. They land on the bush, and he's just chatting away about these bees as they're in the air, thick around us as they settle. But it's not terrible because of the slightly naked child in it.
Now, just to clarify, because you're in the UK, when you say garden, you mean like the yard around the house, right? It's not like a garden with vegetables and stuff, or? Okay,
so garden here is what probably you'd call a yard. Our garden is quite large and has bits of ornamental gardens with flower beds, a lawn, and some vegetables, and some bees in another spot as well. So we're unusually large space here. But yes, we have bees that regularly swarm right in our garden area because there's colonies in the roof of the house. So we regularly get swarms just down in our garden right by the back door.
Oh, nice. Yeah. You have colonies inside of your structure, your house?
Yeah, it's a very, very old house with an old roof structure. And the traditional tiles here, the Kent peg tiles, it's not really possible to seal in under them. So it's a 3-story house with big dormer windows. It's really tall. And they've just been, as far as I'm aware, there've been bees living in that spot for probably 100 years or so.
Wow.
Nice.
Do you have access to it?
No, the property's divided into 2 properties, into 2 floors and 1 flat, and the floor above is a 3rd flat. And the top floor, where we don't have access, has got where the bees are.
Okay.
But I'm happy just catching swarms from them every now and then.
Those are good bees right there.
Yeah.
Do you ever put them on foundationless frames and measure their cells?
I only run foundationless, so all my colonies are foundationless. I have the whole range of cell sizes across the bees I have, and I've measured some frames, and I have a huge variety of cell sizes within a colony, but also often across a frame. So I've measured frames where I've gone everything down to like 4.6, 4.7 up to 5.4 across one frame.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Some areas they're 4.7, 4.8, and then on the other side they're 5.4.
Yeah. So and people talk about different cell sizes and reproduction periods and capped durations and things. Like the bees just do their own thing. I've not really bothered with it. I'm not particularly interested in chasing small cell size across the colonies. For a start, I'd have to replace all my comb, and I'm not particularly fussed about that.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I like when I see the ones that are 4.6, 4.7, but the only time I'm annoyed is if every single cell is 5.3 or bigger. I mean, at least I know with the smaller cell drawing bees, they got it in there, the natural size. You know right away when they're all uniform and huge cells that you got to rotate those out. I mean, for me, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a warm weather thing, the small cells?
Well, no, because I've heard that the bees are smaller in the warm, down south, Florida, Texas, but up here they're just as small in the old cutouts that I do, and some of the swarms that come out of trees that have been there a long time. they're down there at 4, sometimes 4, 6, and 7, but usually around 4.8 millimeters and up.
I was just wondering, because of the AMM bees, which seem to be bigger, I don't know what their cell size is, but they're definitely bigger than normal bees.
I don't think we have those here.
I think you do. I think the Russian bees are AMM.
So
I've not done any kind of sort of in-depth sort of analysis of the cell sizes of my bees, so I really couldn't say. But my impression is that the ones that I get from trees and roofs and things tend to be pretty small on the scale of around here. So I do think that the bees that are coming out of the wild colonies seem to be a little smaller than what I get from managed hives.
Rupert, Tom Seeley was explaining in one of his books that the original bees brought to America were the AMMs, and that he did some genetic testing on his famous bees in the Arnott forests that are survivor bees, and they had a very strong strain of AMM genetics going through them still. So that might be what you're referring to.
Did he find that they were small cell size?
He found several different sizes across the board because the bees were utilizing the comb for different reasons, obviously, which we've established from honey to drones. So it was dependent on the use at the time. Nothing consistent.
When I made those little walkaway splits, I wasn't expecting as many medium frames full of brood when I split my second hive. And so I only had the deep queen castles, and so I put the medium frames in the deeps, which is fine. You just have to cut the comb off later. But so the queen, I was unable to find the queen in that hive, and she ended up in one of those nukes, and so that one built out really fast, and I had to cut the comb off, and I should have measured it, but I didn't.
Come on, man.
Well, it's like one of those things that, it's cool, but I don't know what to do with it anymore. It becomes, I don't want to use the P word, but it becomes political, and people take sides on stuff that doesn't need to have sides taken on it. And so I've just sort of, like, if people want to talk about it, I'll talk about it. I do small cell, always have, but it's not one of those things I want to push, because I don't feel like I have enough solid evidence to push it. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. And I think part of the reason I guess I've never really pursued measuring this stuff is that I don't necessarily see that it's a particularly valuable measurement to have, in that knowing it for its own sake is interesting. You go, cool, that's a nice thing to know. That swarm had particularly small bees in it, or the comb size in this colony is particularly small. But I don't think it impacts how I manage my bees. I don't think it changes how I make my decisions. I'm not going to go out and start replacing comb because of the cell size. So I tend to kind of focus on the things that matter to the decision making in my hives. I think we can get very easily bogged down in the things that don't matter to our decision making, and that can perhaps take a lot of mental energy out of us and out of the process.
In a sense, if you're foundationless, then comb size is sort of like a treatment. Like, you're not going to do it, like why do mite tests if I'm not going to treat? Why measure comb if I'm just going to keep using foundationless? That's how I think about it anyway.
Yeah, pretty much. It doesn't affect how I do things, so why would I care too much? It's a small.
Well, the only argument that could be made for taking a measurement of foundationless comb is to know whether your bees are at whatever their preferred sizing would be. If you're swapping out comb and they're building smaller than they did the last round of comb, you could keep an eye on that and see if they're regressing themselves or not. And if it starts staying stable, then that would be, rather you could tell whether they had been put on foundation that was an artificial size or not.
Yeah, I get that, but I think in my situation, I've expanded a lot of colonies very quickly in 1 year, and I'm still mostly working with the same sets of comb that I had early on in that process. I don't really see that I'm onto a second stage now of replacing much comb. It's happening, but it's not happening lots and lots. So often the cell size that they're on is inherited from comb that I've used for catching a swarm or from a extracted box, rather than something they've drawn themselves. And I don't really see value in going around and replacing serviceable comb for the sake of cell size.
That makes sense.
We talk a lot about, we sort of shifted to our primary teaching for starting beekeeping with catching swarms. And part of my experiment here is being forced to start over from swarms, being forced to follow my own advice that I've been giving all these years, because my main yard with my historic stock was killed in an apparent pesticide kill in the fall of 2018. And so I've been starting back from swarms that I caught in the spring of 2018 and that were housed at a different... Actually, I think the one that was at my mom's place was caught in 2017. But anyway, two different swarms, and I've built back from those swarms, and I'm part of the reason why I'm doing this project is to show people that you can actually take 2 hives and make 15 or 17 out of them.
I've tried to avoid bringing too much new swarm genetics into my apiary because I've had a couple of incredibly aggressive colonies as a result. For those of you who don't know, I'm in the UK. We don't have Africanized bees, but every now and again you get one colony which has just got a terrible mix for some reason. And I keep them on a school site. They ended up being hyper aggressive. They were chasing people 100 meters plus away from the colony. And obviously on a place with children playing football and things, that's a little bit less than ideal. So I've tried to very much go down the route, sort of what Solomon's describing, of making splits rather than depending on swarm genetics. And I now select much more for temperament than I would have done 3 or 4 years ago as a result of the kind of experience we had with that aggressive swarm. And like, I think anyone catch a few swarms, yes, great, always good. But I do think people can split quite reliably year after year after year and carry on expanding. I had a bad year last year, but kind of a limitation of doing my beekeeping as part of a school activity with children on a set timetable each week. We had bad weather. We had school summer holidays. We didn't get the time we needed to manage it well, but there was no reason why I couldn't have done it better even under those circumstances, given more time and more capacity to do it.
I feel like we run into the excuse a lot that people are looking for specific swarm genetics. Like if they can't get that feral survivor swarm that they want, they just won't even try. And, I don't focus on swarms for genetics. Swarms are just for bees. I just need bees. Once I get bees, then I can make more bees. That's the limiting factor when you're making splits, and especially massive numbers of small splits. Is I need one frame of brood to make a split. So if I've got, a hive with many frames of brood, I can make many splits. Anyway, that's one of those things that bugs me, that we keep running across a lot, especially, as moderators, we run across this, well, I can't get the bees that I want, so what's the point in finding swarms?
Ooh.
Like, well, just get the bees. Just get the bees.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about this earlier when you said, you're asking what we wanted to talk about, but one of the conversations that I just had, it might have been today or yesterday, some guy was talking about how he has to treat because he has a lot of beekeepers in his area and they all treat. And I tried to tell him, if you have that many beekeepers in your area, first of all, you should not have to buy bees at all. You should be able to catch plenty of swarms, and that's the number one thing, not buy the bees. And then, like I always say 1,000 times, just learn beekeeping with them, or just do beekeeping with them. I've said that 1,000,000 times. Not everyone is going to be able to have their own fantastic line of survivor bees. It's still treatment-free beekeeping. You're keeping your bees. You're not contributing to terrible genetics. You're just using up other people's bees to have the same amount of fun that I am. Just, maybe some of my bees are feral and live, and can live, but they still don't. I'm never going to reach a point where I have 100% survival over and over again. That's ridiculous, and I don't even want that. It amazes me that people have 8-10 colonies or however many they have, and they absolutely want every single one to survive every year. And then in the spring, they're just completely overwhelmed with swarms and bees and splits. you're talking about turning 2 into 17. I want to try to turn 17 into 2 if I could, because I just got too many here.
Or 70 into 20.
Yeah, no, I want to make them go down, but I don't know what it is. It's just one of the things I love about messing with these bees is just going to a swarm call, finding the tree 10 feet away, and I don't know why. I love that, like knowing that they were in there. Maybe they're not special. They could have been in there from last year from some hive, but many of them I've been following for years, and I just think I love the idea of just knowing that I have some bees that didn't need anybody at all to mess with them, and they're going to really not get too messed with when I get them, and I'll bring those home. If I'm catching one that's just in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of just a neighborhood, I don't really love those bees that much, and I try to but I like the feral bees, and I like knowing that some of them are building small cells. It's just interesting to me. I don't think it fixes everything. It's just a few things that I find really interesting. It's bees that are kind of wild, in quotes, and I like to see the combs that wild bees make. I love that.
On my own bees and swarms and things, I had this chat with Solomon when we did our podcast a few months ago. I very much view my beekeeping as participating in the local gene pool of bees. I don't view that I have bees that are substantially different or special from any of the local bees. I've just got the local bees. I do try and, when I requeen from my own bees, I try and requeen from what looks like a good colony. And that's a colony that builds up quickly in spring, that has good numbers of bees come sort of midsummer time, that is looking like it's going to make a good yield. But I don't particularly worry about mite counts or anything like that. I just look at like spring build up, and temperaments, and if it looks like it's going to make a good honey yield. And I think this hang up on, I need to buy treatment-free bees from someone, I need to have bees that are mite resistant, is a red herring. It's not helpful. You can do plenty well enough just from actively participating in the bees that are in your area, whatever that area is. And you might have a different type of success from what I do. You might be someone who needs to catch 20 swarms each year to keep your numbers up. Or you might be like me, where you can get by just by maybe 1 or 2 swarms to boost numbers, but also splits of your own. I don't think we need to be latched onto a particular type of bee as part of our beekeeping. I
live in a unique, harsh area where we don't have the luxury of being picky about what bees we have. I'm on the 48th parallel, up about an hour south of the border to Alberta, Canada, way up in the northwest corner of Montana. And our first average frost in the fall is September 8th. Our last average frost in the spring is June 8th. It snowed here in June 8th before. So we have a very short forage window. And if there are feral bees in the forest around me, I don't know where they are. I'm sure that they're there. I would have to beeline them, but I've been too busy collecting swarms and beekeeping to go find some feral colonies. What we have up here is we have very long days. Up north, we have 16 hours of daylight in the height of the summer. And we have not a lot of people, so not a lot of registered commercial bee yards. There's Montana's a huge state. There's lots of room for the beekeepers to spread out and register. And we have one of the greatest forage opportunities in all of the states. Our wildflower honey is pretty famous. And so that is a recipe for hundreds and hundreds of commercial beekeepers retire their bees in Montana when they're done doing the pollination circuit on the almonds, the watermelons, the apples up in Washington. And so the bees that I'm capturing each year and that my club members are capturing are very likely bees brought up from the south. So we have very high mortality up here because the bees are not accommodated to the local weather and the short forage window, and the fact that they're trying to brood up in February and we're having snow still in June 8th. And so what that looks like for me is capturing freebies, and there are so many, and they do become pests in people's cabins, in the side of their houses. So I'm capturing all of these swarms. We have a list for a club where everyone's on a rotation to be able to come, have a chance at capturing the bees. And I will have dozens of colonies. I'll be giving them away. In some years, we have 70% losses. If you look at the Bee Informed Partnership up here in Montana, about 12 years ago, there was 70% losses reported. And that's because we don't have locally adapted bees. But here's the thing. I am having a blast out there. I'm watching my traps. I'm capturing them in traps. I'm going out and integrating with the community. It's educational opportunity as you're pulling a swarm off of a branch to explain to people why the bees are doing what they're doing, their democratic process of choice of where they live, what the bees do for us. At the end of the summer, I have boxes of honey. And if the next spring I do not have the bees anymore, I have all of the comb and I have hundreds of pounds of honey. And then I get to start it all over. And so from my perspective, survival or not, I'm a beekeeper and I'm beekeeping and I love it. And that is what my definition of success is. So I don't want anyone to feel like making it through the winter is the intention in all places, and capturing feral bees is the intention in all places. It really depends on where you live, and you can still do this successfully, even if it doesn't match up to the definition of other success.
Absolutely.
Where do you think your bees are coming from?
My bees are coming from most likely the local or commercial hives that are being retired nearby in the valley.
That would be cool. There's no pressure at all to try to make those bees get through winter. If I lived there, oh my God, I would just load up with bees, stack boxes up, make a bunch of honey, prepare them a little bit for winter, and then just go to sleep and forget about them and see if anything's alive in the spring. And if not, start over. There's no pressure there. That would be great. I don't know why I pressure myself here, because it's not as bad as where you live.
Yeah, it's a completely different conversation for me. I'm not going to say that mites don't exist up here, that they're not. I don't know what their ranking is on winter kills, but they're not the number one reason for winter kill up here. We don't have small hive beetle. It's too cold. The larva doesn't survive in the dirt. We don't have a lot of the pests, ants. We don't have a lot of pests. It's just, Montana kills everything. And that
Montana.
It does. It tried to kill me a couple of times, which Michael likes to tease me about. But so it's a completely different experience when, even if the bees make it through the cold, if they do not have severe parasitism of the mites, if they have enough food, they might make it through the cold itself, but then it's the middle of May before they see their first flow. And so a lot of beekeepers here start feeding their bees aggressively mid-February, with both pollen patties and sugar water to keep the bees alive. And I'm sitting here chuckling to myself, pulling off 100 pounds of honey off of a dead out that I get to keep for myself. And I'm thinking, why are you going to so much effort to keep something alive that was not intended to be alive at this point in this part of the country to your own detriment? Don't even get to have the sweet stuff at the end. So really depends on what your goals are,
I love getting free honey out of dead outs. It's great. We had a bunch of set stuff that I had in a colony a couple of years back. And one of my favorite pictures of me with my son, my eldest son, who's now 8, is him standing over a bucket with a knife in his hand, absolutely appalled facial expression, because I've told him he can't eat any more honey and that we're turning it into mead.
You don't let him drink the mead?
He'd have a go now. He wouldn't at that age. He was only about...
And
I think
I
think it had about a kilo of honey by that point, so it was probably about time to cut him off.
Oh, one of the fun things to watch develop up here is that, I took over the club a couple of years ago here locally, and a lot of people were keeping their bees in the traditional way that people farther south would be. And so I started doing some experimentation for my master certification and working with some of the beekeepers up here, some of the beekeepers at Missoula University of Montana, and with Tom Seeley, and also a beekeeper way up north in the Yukon, Etienne Tardef, that I met at Apimondia this year in Montreal. And I saw some really compelling evidence that the bees would not have as much oxidative stress if there was a lot more insulation involved than the R1 that you get with a traditional 3/4 inch piece of wood on a hive. And so I conveyed that to my club members. I asked all of them to either buy polystyrene hives or to wrap their hives with 2-inch blueboard. And I even challenged some of them to not ventilate the top of their hives in an effort to conserve the moisture and the heat in the hive. And I believe this is the first year since I've been in the club that people have successfully got their bees through the winter this spring. Yeah. So we only had one club member that I know of lose all her bees, and she only had one. And it was a late swarm capture that was weak, and we weren't sure it was going to make it to begin. So I think we're making progress. And our club is a smattering of everything from IPM to treatment-free. Everyone gets along. So it's kind of an ideal place to be keeping bees right now. I'm pretty happy. I wish other people could experience this, our laid-back approach too.
I just realized because I use 2-inch foam board for an inner cover for insulation. If I made an oversized telescoping lid and then just, I don't know, I could maybe use like shrink wrap and put the right sized 2-inch foam board around the outside and then shrink wrap it on there and then put that oversized telescoping cover on top. That would make a nice little system for wrapping hives.
Sounds like it. I'd like to see, I'm having a hard time visualizing completely what you are. I'd like to see that on paper.
Just sort of like build a hive of 2-inch foam on the outside of your hive already, and then to hold it all together, just wrap it with shrink wrap.
I actually do wrap. No, I actually do wrap. Additionally, the 2-inch board, I wrap it with that reflective bubble.
Okay.
Yeah. So I group my hives together in pairs or threes. I do threes if I have the nukes in between them. And so they all get the 2-inch blue board or polystyrene, if they're already polystyrene. And then I completely wrap them together as a group so they're sharing walls with that reflective bubble wrap. And I don't want anyone to think that these ideas are my own. I got a lot of these from that Yukon beekeeper. He has a Facebook group if anyone's interested in checking out his winterizing techniques.
I don't like it. I don't like any of it.
You'd rather just let them die?
I hate all that wrapping. I wrap stuff and it just dies and gets all wet. I don't like it, especially tall colonies.
Why would you need to wrap your climate?
Well, my first couple years, I thought that's what you did. That's what a lot of people did. But okay. I slowly over the years just kept peeling stuff away. It used to be a 4-box high hive, and they would all die just about. Then 3, then 2, wrapped, then not wrapped. Now it's down to where a 5-frame nuke, not wrapped, not in the sun, will survive.
Yeah.
Negative 22 Fahrenheit degrees.
Yeah. In my situation, I've actually found I get probably my best survival rate on my colonies for my 6-frame deep polynukes compared to my big hives. And I think what's going on there, what I'm finding is that the nukes have probably a lower mite count percentage going into winter compared to the big hives. And so actually they tend to then build up in spring, ready to move across into a full-size colony. Angela, I had a question for you. Think about your wrapping and winterizing. You talk about some insulation board and wrapping and all those things. Obviously, it's a time-consuming process if you're dealing with lots of colonies, but also there's quite a bit of investment in materials and manufacturing your board to the right size and all that stuff. I run my own colonies on polyhives. Do you feel that the polyhives alone are sufficiently insulating in your conditions? Or do you think you need to do additional insulation on top of that?
No, the polys are just fine. Part of my experiment this last winter was I used a remote weather station, and I put I put there was it was measuring the temperature, the humidity, and a couple of other factors in each of the hives. I also did control versions. And what I found was that the polystyrenes were on average 10 to 15 degrees higher at any given moment than the traditional hives that had 2-inch blueboard around them. So
you're talking Fahrenheit rather than centigrade.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes.
And so they were outperforming. They were doing well. I do not have to insulate my polystyrenes. I'm just placing them next to each other.
And then the follow-on question from that is, where you are, do you see a big price difference in buying poly compared to buying traditional wood? Because where I am, we can get almost the same cost. Poly's probably 10 to 15% more expensive than timber hives.
That's situational, depending on whether you're purchasing the wood pre-assembled or not. If it's pre-assembled, there's not much of a difference. We actually have one of the main suppliers for woodenware is just 45 minutes south of us, and we can get the woodenware even cheaper than most people would around the country. So I have not seen, I would say 10 to 15% difference is actually probably pretty close. And considering the amount of materials that you would add onto that, going and buying the blue board, also probably the only really effective way to cut blue board is to use a table saw. So you've got the cost of the table saw. So, it probably would in the long term be better to just purchase the polystyrenes, to be honest.
Yeah. And I've always found that the polys also do better, not just through the winter, but through the spring build up and into the summer as well. In the spring, I find that they brood out wider across the box. And in the summertime, when it gets really hot here, because we do have some hot days in England, they are able to regulate their temperature better.
I would agree with that observation. The man who owns, Steve Thorson, owns a Montana Honeybee Company down in Bozeman, and he is where I have to drive to purchase polystyrenes. It's a 5-hour drive from here. And he was explaining recently that he sees a gain of 30 pounds of honey per hive in his polystyrene run hives over traditional.
Huge. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have, my temperatures here are not such that I really need insulation. I haven't noticed the need for it. I can have a 10-frame nuke survive no problem. I would be interested in trying them. I mean, my wooden hives aren't going to last forever. The other thing that I have here is that Shastina Millworks is one of the major box producers here, and their factory is just half an hour drive from here. So if I want to buy boxes by the pallet, I can get them for dirt cheap. If I want to get them individually, it's probably cheaper to have them shipped up from Man Lake down in Woodland.
Well, I mean, as far as insulation and stuff like that, one of my favorite ones is we were at a beekeeping club meeting a while back, and everyone's talking about how they're going to wrap their hives and all this. And Bruce pipes up and says he's going to take one of his swarm traps that's in a fiberboard pot through winter, just in the fiberboard pot. And that thing came through winter. All he did was throw a tarp over it to keep it from getting soaked and falling apart.
That thing's 7 colonies now. That's how many times I split that bad boy, and it's one. I'm going to do it again this year because I have one in a fiber trap out in about a half hour from here, and I was going to cut it out, but I said, no, I don't. Why? I'm just going to tuck it under something, throw a tarp on it again, and let it go.
I am so jealous of you guys to just have bees coming out your ears that way. Just to put things in perspective, swarm season is still 2 weeks away here. So
you can move, though.
I know.
I would move. Wait till June for swarm season. No way.
I've seen photos of Angela's place. I don't think she should move.
I know.
No, it's a nice place. It's big and open, and it's a great place. It's just but cold.
It is. It tries to kill me every year.
Yeah.
How cold does it get in the winter, Angela?
Our average temperature is, our average high during the day is 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It frequently gets down to -20 Fahrenheit at night. And I understand bees are meant. They're technically meant to survive cold. I think at this point, I'm approaching this in a different way. I'm attempting to keep bees treatment free in the cold. And let me explain the distinction. There's a huge amount of oxidative stress that occurs on an organism when it's, freezing. And the bees have to take turns producing endothermic heat. And that is what ages a bee when it takes its turn to produce the heat in the cluster. And so when you compound that kind of stress on top of the fact that I'm trying to be treatment free, and so there are endemic viruses and parasites and bacteria in there, that is just a recipe. It's a bomb waiting to go off. So my attempt, the reason that I'm even going to any efforts in pursuing this strong insulation is an attempt to reduce the stress on the bee so that it is not spending all of its energy fighting both infections and maybe just the infections. And so that's why I'm even this and pursuing this. I may get to a point where I just throw my hands up and say, I'm just the gal that captures the swarms and then collects the honey in the late fall. And I'd be fine with that.
Well, but what's about moisture? Do you have a moisture quilt or anything like that?
Sorry, what? I'm not understanding the words you're saying. What?
Sorry. Do you have a moisture quilt or something? You have problems with moisture?
No, it's incredibly dry here. One of the ways that I combated the moisture this year was to make sure that my insulation on the roof of my hive was double the sides. So if there's any condensation, it does not occur on the inner cover above the bees. It actually will condense on the sides and not drip on them. And I did not lose any bees to moisture freezing them. And so I have no upper ventilation at all. I do not have moisture quilts or wood chips or moisture boards or ventilation of any kind above them. It's just fine.
Is there a way to really solidly glue foam board together to make a durable structure out of it?
I'd love to know that.
I've seen it done with spray foam, like the window and door trim foam that doesn't expand a crazy bunch, and use that as like a glue. Like you just lay a strip and then hold them together.
I see.
I've got an experiment that I'm going to try this year. I've got some repairs to make on some of my polyhives. I've heard, and I haven't tested this yet, that you can dissolve polystyrene in acetone to make a really thick paste that acts like a glue that will melt and bond into other polystyrene. So I've got some hives that have got small holes in them where I've had woodpecker damage, and I'm planning on dissolving some polystyrene to make a paste to then cement into those holes. I bet you could do the same job on your foam board with a really thick paste of polystyrene to glue them together.
I just so happen to have some acetone.
Have you tried the coving adhesive?
Coving adhesive?
Yeah, you get the fake plaster stuff, which is just basically polystyrene, and there's an adhesive that you use for that. It's almost like a polyfiller type stuff. That may work, I don't know.
I just used duct tape, worked great.
Many ducks had to die.
Yeah.
Can we go back to what Angela was talking about? Sorry. That oxidative stress thing you were talking about? Why? I don't know how to ask. Why worry about that? Why worry about it? Wouldn't all bees have that?
Yeah, it would be compounded much more greatly up here because it goes on for so long. We have such cold winters that go on for so long.
And I think the main
not
difference...
as long as Canada, right? I mean, they have, or there's got to be somewhere north of you where there's that people probably they don't think that much about that stuff. Do they? I don't know. I'm ignorant, of course, about this, but I've never thought about it, and I kind of didn't even really want to know about that. Now I'm like, are my bees going to be stressed?
Well, no. I mean, you're obviously that's what you're selecting for with your survivors. If they are, that's probably ultimately what's killing a bee. I mean, what ultimately kills a bee is oxidative stress in some form, whether it's pressure from it ages out. That's oxidative stress when a bee ages out, or when it succumbs to a disease. It's when it takes oxidative stress, it compromises its immune system.
Unless I'm misunderstanding, it seems to me the issue with the oxidative stress question comes from not trying to protect the bees, specifically, but the difference between, say, a natural cavity in the ground where they're well insulated, or in a tree where generally there's going to be 2 or 3 or more inches of wood to insulate. And so the bees are able to heat the cluster with much less effort than they would in a weak 3/4 inch board hive that's full of holes and has corners and things.
Exactly. Spot on. It's trying to reduce their required output. A lot of people up here in my area, the experienced beekeepers, will say that you have to have 100 pounds of honey on a hive for it to make it, which leaves almost nothing for the beekeeper. And so I'm trying to reduce that demand of honey. And I'm also just trying to get them consistently through without having to rely on breeds from the South, and that's my goal.
Angela, in your area, you said you haven't found any proper feral bees, wild bees.
I haven't looked, but yeah.
Could your climate even support them? Are you so harsh that they can only they can only be found in human managed colonies?
No, there are feral bees here. I reached out to the state entomologist who's based about 4 hours south of me, and she said that there have been several documented and discovered feral bees. I believe Leo Shereshkin, who is famous for his Layens horizontal hives, has been on this podcast before. He was invited up to Bozeman by the same group that I mentioned earlier, Steve Thorson, and to do a presentation for them. And they took him to a canyon where there were bees successfully living in the walls of the canyon within rock. So that's well documented. So they are here. I am so saturated by, if you look at a map of the registered bee yards in my area, the whole valley that I live in is absolutely saturated with commercial beekeepers. So I would have to travel out into the national parks area here, into the timber, if I wanted to avoid capturing commercial swarms, which I could do. I'm so busy. I've got so many bees. Why go to that extra trouble?
I wasn't really asking whether or not you would try to catch the ferals, but just to get a sense for how harsh the situation is for your bees, whether or not that is something that's even achievable for bees in your area. So the indication there is that it is, under the right circumstances, that you can have feral bees survive.
I believe the ones that they are finding are very highly insulated areas, protected from wind, most importantly. You
described a canyon, so presumably we're talking trees in a canyon, thick insulation, already sheltered, protected area.
Yes.
I think they can. Watching the dispersal of wild bees coming up from Europe, they went right up into Sweden and right across Russia. So they obviously can, if they can find the right cavity, then they can survive.
I think the issue is that certainly in the UK we have a very tidy environment. The compulsion of people who own an area of land is to make it nice and tidy and pretty, and kind of the Garden of England's type attitude. So where an old broken down tree might have been 100 years ago, might have been left to decay gracefully, it's now tidied up. And what's been really interesting, I've been following some various UK tree surgeons groups about sort of best practices, and they are now much more keen to leave veteran trees to decay in a safe way, but leave old stems with a hollow trunk potentially for another 20, 30, 40 years to stand and fall apart slowly. So I think we may see more habitat available here in the UK than perhaps has been over the last sort of 50 to 100 years.
That's excellent.
That's good news.
Yeah, I think this is true. I think so much the forests are managed now. It's getting better up here. There's a lot of trees that are just left to fall. But there's a problem with the wild bees here seem to be in old houses, derelict houses, but they're going the same way because we're so short of houses that there aren't very many derelict houses anymore. Done up and barns are getting done up, and there just isn't very many natural spaces. But I think people are more aware of it, and things are changing.
Of the wild colonies that I know of in my area, I think I know of 2 that are in trees and probably 7 or 8 that are in chimneys, roofs, just sort of buildings and structures rather than in trees. So I completely see what you're saying. And I think we've had people that have, over the last time, where people have been repairing roofs and doing insulation, we've found that those cavities have been filled by modern insulation materials, probably as part of energy efficiency, but also probably in part to keep the bees out. So that habitat is decreasing in modern buildings and in old buildings as they get repaired.
Yeah, I think so. And the modern insulation seems to be pretty good for bumblebees and wasps. My attic is full of it. But the only wild colonies I've found have been actually in buildings, fairly old buildings.
Rupert, I mean, are you Ireland? Where are you?
No, I'm in Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, sorry. So we've obviously got the Asian Hornet recently arrived in the UK, and there've been a few sightings down in the southeast where I am. That's our big worry now coming through. I feel like we've kind of weathered the Varroa storm here, in that I can keep bees through without treatment. I can catch swarms every year because there's plenty of bees in the environment. But again, we've got this new problem coming through, and I think we'll probably always have new problems coming through in beekeeping. I don't know. You don't have these Asian hornets in America yet, do you?
Oh, yes, we do.
Are you talking about the giant one? Like
the murder hornets.
Yeah. So from what I understand, they've only found a couple of specimens, not an actual hive or colony, but they've only found a couple of specimens. So they're putting out traps around Washington State to see if they can narrow down where it would be and exterminate them before they get too far.
So this murder hornet is the Asian hornet that we've been having here. It's the same species.
Yes.
Yes, but with the media flair for it.
Yeah, the extra hype.
Yeah.
I think you've been worried about them in England for the last 2 or 3 years, Michael. Is that right?
Yeah. There was a sighting last summer down near Dungeness, which is on the mainland, which is only 10 miles from me. One queen was found, but they've been worried about them for quite a while. They've certainly been found on some of the Channel Islands and things, but that's all we've had.
I'm not too worried about them here. It's estimated it'll be a few years before we get them.
I'm not worried about them when they come to Montana. It'll kill them.
Same thing with Africanized bees, yeah.
Yep.
I'm interested. I've recently discovered, or at least it's my understanding, that there weren't any honeybees on the West Coast before about 1850 something.
So late.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that because we have this big patch of desert and mountain ranges and things between, Baja California all the way up to Alaska, really. We didn't have opossums here either until the Great Depression. They were various stories I've heard they were either introduced on purpose for food or they were brought over in hay somehow.
I think they were deliberately introduced into America quite a few times, but they always had a problem getting across to the coast.
I read something. The story was that some guy had brought them and he died, and then they were auctioned off. Like 3 hives were auctioned off, and then within like 5 years they were everywhere. They went for a pretty good price too, like $200 a colony.
Well, not to kill everything, but I have to get heading out for a Memorial Day thing, but it was nice talking to everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
I also have to go because my family need me, so I'm going to disappear. Lovely to chat with you guys. All the best.
Nice to hear your voices. I'll do it again.
Oh, this is great.
Absolutely.
So it's just the cool people now.
Well, not yet.
Okay, Mitch is still here.
But now, yes. See ya.
See you guys. I missed a little part of our conversation because a call came through and it just turned off my Zoom.
What'd you miss?
Oh, I don't know because I missed it. But
you missed a good bit, I think.
You guys were talking about something, and as soon as I came back on, I think someone said it was $200 a colony. Is that about bees?
Oh, I was talking about. It's my understanding that honeybees were introduced to the West Coast in California in the Bay Area in like 1850 something.
Oh.
That they didn't exist. Because we were talking about whether or not bees could survive in Montana and other places. It seems they've survived pretty well down in the desert, down in down in Arizona even before Africanized bees were introduced. So I wasn't quite sure, because we do have lots of mountain ranges and things. But at the same time, I have seen feral honeybees up at 6,000 feet and higher, up along the Pacific Crest Trail, where it crosses right at the California-Oregon border there, right by I-5.
I had a call the other day. I found the coolest feral tree colony ever. Out here where I live, there's a lot of farms, but between the farms, there's all these rows of old trees, like just monster trees, so big, 3 people couldn't hug them, touch hands. But there's like a cliff, and the tree, it was a call about a swarm. I started dealing with them, and I said, let me just walk around here. And I took 3 steps back, and I could see them. And they're going in and out of a crack on this huge tree. But right above the crack where they were coming out of, was these shelf mushrooms hanging right over top of the hole where they lived at.
Ooh.
So there was no way for water to get into this tree, but these huge shelf mushrooms were hanging over it. It was cool. I wish I couldn't get around to see the front because I would have fell down this cliff. But I want to get back there and take a cool video of it. We have so many feral colonies here. It's ridiculous. And luckily I'm able to talk most people into leaving them alone, even when they're in their house, in their roof. They're just everywhere.
I feel challenged now to get out into the forests around me, do some beelining, and see if I can actually find feral colonies. I think that would be fascinating.
I've never been good at that.
I'm planning on doing that this summer. I bought one of those little beelining boxes from, I think, Jim Fisher before he passed away. I've never used it. And I want to go up there in those mountains and spot some feral colonies, because to me that's so interesting that, well, first of all, I've been told for the past 17 years that I've been a beekeeper that treatment-free beekeeping doesn't work. So, when I find these spots that are up so far away from people with feral bees for so many years, that's just super interesting to me.
Me too.
I read a fair bit about the first bees coming into America. I think they're guessing it was a few hundred years ago. But there was also people who were suggesting that they could have come across from Russia. So they went up through Europe, across Russia, and then they could have crossed, where is it? Kamchatka to Alaska or something, where the land was connected. So they reckon that they could have been here. They could have been in America millions of years ago, and then possibly died out and then got reintroduced. But they would have been reintroduced from various directions. From South America, from the Chinese probably brought them. Lots of Chinese people went to California. I imagine they would have been taking bees with them. I think the big problem for Western people bringing them was that they were coming to the East Coast, and then they were trying to get them across land. And I think the Rocky Mountains were a big barrier to the bees naturally progressing. But as soon as people brought the bees, then they would have been spreading out. I think they can live pretty much anywhere until you get up to the kind of tundra regions. They've survived the ice age. I think they'll survive wherever they've got forage in the summer. They'll make.
I'm soon ready to send Angela one of my favorite queens from here.
I
just can't wait to see what it does. I'm just going to be a rock star too, like one of my favorite ever. And I just want you to just let them build out one box really heavy. I may have told you that. Don't worry about their stress. They deal with me, so they got plenty of experience with that. And I want to see what the heck they do. I think
they're Oxidative Stress. Okay.
They're going to be great. Watch.
Well, I think I'll wait until I capture a swarm and re-queen those. I was telling you guys yesterday that I think that there's some sort of a nasty something going on in these splits that I got from someone else. And so I don't want to doom them by giving them bees that are, spiraling the drain. So
CTD?
Yes.
Have you done any tests on them for AFB or?
Nope. Well, I mean, I've done, clinical observation, and there's no ropey brood coming out of there. There's no collapsed cell cappings. There's just this very strong, off-putting smell of not rotting meat, but dirty socks in a locker, and heavy signs of parasitizing by the mites, a lot of pinholes in the cappings. And oddly, a good portion of the bees are hairless, as if they have chronic bee paralysis, but they don't. So
they smell like dirty, rotten socks in a locker.
Yes. Yes.
How do you know what that smells like? I don't know. God, where do you work out at?
And they were superseding their queen when I got a hold of them. Both of them were superseding their queens. And so a lot of these point towards this idiopathic brood disease that essentially they don't know the cause, and it looks like foul brood, walks like foul brood, but it's technically not foul brood. So somebody encouraged me to send a sample to the state to get it tested to see. The bees seem to be doing their best to fix it. And so I'm going to let them struggle along. Since the state entomologist did an inspection, she cleared it of American foul brood. So I'm not putting anyone at risk around me by keeping the bees. So I'm just kind of interested to see what they do with this.
Well, let's talk about that. First of all, what does idiopathic mean for those of us who don't know?
So it means that it's showing a pathology, but you don't know what it is. The definition of it, doesn't seem to be a source. So it's denoting a condition that arises spontaneously with an unknown cause.
Do you think you might have discovered a new brood disease?
Not new. New in the life, the history of bees. Apparently this has been around since about the time that CCD started. And they were finding it in a lot of the migratory bees that were moving around. The only other symptom, which I'm not experiencing, that they were finding was that the larva, or was it the pupae? I'm not sure which stage it's in, if it's larva or pupae, but it was liquid at the bottom of the cell, liquefied, but it was not ropey. And it didn't have the characteristics of the American foul brood. At first, they thought that it was from very heavy parasitism of the mites, but then they were finding it in hives that did not have mites at all, or hardly any at all. And so I don't know if it's a stress response. I don't know if it's from being treated and causing an imbalance in the microbiome of the bees. The person that I got the splits from, it was a thank you for me helping her do splits, and she had treated the bees for the first time in her career, a 6-year career, last fall when someone convinced her to treat. And then come this spring, this is what we have. So I don't know if there's a connection there.
What did she take them with?
That's a good question. I don't know. I need to follow up and find out.
Battery acid?
Something. It's been noted several times. It actually has an acronym. I'm trying to recall. Idiopathic. I think it's IBDS, Idiopathic Brood Syndrome, or Idiopathic Foul Brood Syndrome. I'll have to look that up again. I don't have that at my fingertips, but
so we'll just call it IBS.
Yeah. But all that long story to come back around to, I'd rather not put Bruce's coveted queens in one of these guys. So
she'll clean it up.
Yeah. If you want to breed for resistant bees, you gotta test them against disease problems.
That's true. That's true.
Is there anything else we want to talk about?
No,
I'm ready to celebrate Memorial Day myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 2 swarm calls that came in while I've been on here. One guy drove under a branch on his riding mower and hit one with his head, and it spilled all over his mower, and it's all over the ground right now. And I just sent it to somebody from our group, the buddy who I've been sending all the bees out in that area. And then the other one is a friend of mine who just is completely freaking out. Not a bee friend, just a regular person type of friend. And she has a swarm in her yard. What are the chances? Called me up. Well, sent me a text. So,
well, I guess you guys better get to working on that.
Yeah, I've got my neighbours asking me to come down for a barbecue and a beer at a safe distance.
I guess I could go roast a hot dog or something.
Well, thank you for doing this, Solomon. It was great chatting with you all.
Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's great to have everybody all together. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Thanks very much.
I liked it.
Do it again sometime.
Yeah, let's definitely do it. At least, I don't know, bi-monthly.
That would be great.
Is that every 2 months or every 2 weeks?
Your choice.
All right, every week. One per week.
And we don't always have to record it either.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, take care, everybody.
Talk to you later.
All right, cheers.
Thanks for joining us all today. We had a blast. If you want to support the podcast and the Facebook group and all the rest of the stuff we do, you can do that at patreon.com/TFB. If you're looking for how-to videos and other lectures and things, you can find those at youtube.com/treatment-free beekeeping. The Facebook group is at Treatment-Free Beekeepers on Facebook. And we have an old school forum at tfbforum.com. And have fun keeping bees, because if you're not having fun, chickens are probably easier.